I want to welcome you all, and of course, I want to thank the town of Clarkdale, the staff, and the dignitaries that are joining us today. We are very excited about another year working with Clarkdale. And so, yeah, there's just such good things to come. So thank you for going down this road with us again. As Steve said, my name is Ann Richmond, and I have been with ASU now for about 12 years. And Mayor Van Galzik, we go back a ways. Uh, and so over that course of time, the Sustainable Cities Network has developed. It's over a decade old. And the purpose is really to engage our ASU School of Sustainability in its students, its staff, and its faculty with our local communities. It was created to create a municipal network of sustainability practitioners that could share best practices with each other, identify challenges, and also work together on collective sustainability solutions at the local level. And so one of the benefits of I guess that network is figuring out how to match students and faculty with our local challenges. And so that's where Project Cities has really come in. And it was created in 2017 as a way for us to work with a dedicated set of communities on local community challenges. And a part of it is to provide value to the cities. We know that they often lack resources and staff and intellectual time to be able to pursue different challenges. And we know that our students and our talented faculty have those capabilities. And so kind of matching those together so that we can provide you with that extra capacity that you need as a community to move ahead. And so we are one of 30 to 40 universities across the country that are using a similar model to Project Cities in that, matching student capacity with needs of local communities. And so we often learn from our counterparts across the country as well. But we are now in our fourth program cycle for 2020-2021. And so this is, we couldn't be more thrilled. We're very excited about the successes that took place over the last 3 to 4 years. It's taken a while to get our footing and kind of learn how to perfect our systems, but I think we've got a good thing going now. And we really appreciate the town of Clarkdale for being part of that journey with us, as well as providing some very good outputs, not only for the town, but for other communities around the state. And I think that's really important to reiterate, is that you are really providing some helpful ideas and research for not only your community, but for that of others. And what great experiential for our students to really learn what it's like to work in a professional environment, but also to provide some really meaningful ideas and research. So for that, I want to thank you. And I don't want to take up too much time because I know there's so much great discussion that's going to take place, but I do want to thank you in advance for your commitment and your time and for working with our wonderful students and staff and faculty. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Anne. And with that, for the agenda for today, we're going to do some opening remarks first here. We'll do a panel discussion with our esteemed council members and the mayor. And then from there, we'll go into our breakout sessions. I want to do some quick acknowledgements. We have on the line with us Mayor Doug Van Gossig, who has been mayor of Clarkdale since 2004. Really fantastic guy. He's a scientist by trade and an incredible photographer. Fun fact about Mayor Van Gossig. We're also joined by Councilmember Bill Regner, and Councilmember Regner's been with the town of Clarkdale since 2010. He comes from private sector development, I believe, if I recall correctly. And then we also have Councilmember Debbie Hunseter, who has been with the council since 2018. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to the town manager, Tracy Lavinka, Tracy is relatively new to the town of Clarkdale. She came on right as our partnership was kicking off here. And bless her heart, comes in, finds out that there was this agreement that's already been signed and approved, and now she has to execute this weird partnership with ASU. But she and her staff have really stepped up to the plate and been such an incredible asset to the ASU community, and I can tell to the Clarkdale community as well. Tracy comes from the town of DeSoto, Texas, if I recall correctly, where I want to say you had about 2 decades on their staff, deputy city manager. All right, I'm nailing my intros today. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Tracy to tell us a little bit about the community and what this partnership means to her team and of course to you all and how they'd like to support your education this semester.
Thank you, Stephen, and I appreciate you taking the time to introduce my elected officials. I am so fortunate to have them be a part of this panel, and we're really looking forward to this. So we as a group, a staff, we like to be engaged. You're correct that when I first came on, it was a learning curve for me to understand what exactly it was in the partnership, but fortunately for me, I had good staff. There's great faculty, including yourself and Anne, that assisted me in learning what we were trying to achieve. And this will be our 3rd semester that we've actually been able to work with students. We have done everything from working with capstone students that were graduates to working with entire classes. And we've also been real fortunate this year that we get to work with the EPIC students as well. So we're really looking forward to broadening those resources and being able to really get some good information, assessments, data, and anything else that can be provided. As Stephen mentioned, we actually are a very small town, but we say that we might be small, but we're mighty in stature because we think outside the box when it comes to problem solving and what it takes to actually keep our community running. We were the first planned community in Arizona, which makes us very unique in that respect. But the one thing we found out is for being one of the first planned communities, we actually were planned out very well. And so that's an attribute that we get to really build upon. And as ASU Sustainable Cities has seen from last year's participation, you know, we really have things that we can really expand upon. And that's because we had a good foundation, thank goodness. We are a small community of 4,400, but at the same time, we are a very engaged community. One thing about Clarkdale is our residents really do get involved, and we've seen that from their participation when it comes to stakeholders meetings to how they actually want to approach some of the things that are happening in our environment. The other things that we really look forward to is the fact that you are able to take a concept and you are actually able to look at what is happening in today's society and what's happening with Clarkdale, and you're able to take those concepts and actually work with us to make them work. And that's something that we as Clarkdale and the staff really value. Because we don't have this vast number of employees, we really do get to use you as a resource, and that resource is married with what our talents are as staff and what our own background and professions can bring to that. And so that is something that we value extremely for what the product that we get out of this type of program. The other thing that we really appreciate is that you allow us to interact with the students and provide some of that professional guidance when it comes to what they're trying to accomplish. We hope, and we've seen, that they take what they've learned from us and they put that out. They are able to acquire jobs. They've got real world experiences. And for us, that's really important because we want to make sure that your success is our success and vice versa. So that has been something that is invaluable to everybody, including the students that have walked away from this program. This Sustainable Cities project or the Sustainable Park project and some of the others that we're looking at as far as the bridge, Bitter Creek Bridge, and our smart towns and affordable housing, all of these are things that are at the forefront of every community pretty much right now. Everyone is dealing with some aspect of this. Arizona is one of those states that really does value the environment. And we also understand that our resources are limited. And we know that we have to be a part of the solution as opposed to continuing to attribute to the problem. So we've been very fortunate that our community actually reviewed something and came up with a concept many years ago. Now it's to a point where we actually have an opportunity to put it in front of students and academics and see just what it is that can be fleshed out of that concept. So we're looking forward to that partnership. I will not mix my words. I'm not an expert in this field. I'm so lucky and fortunate to have Mayor Von Gossett to actually help guide this process, because this is something that he is very educated and very knowledgeable about. At the same time, I think all of my staff right now is really eager to see what comes out of something like this and how we can either facilitate or push it through to another level for us as opposed to a plan. We have a Bitter Creek Bridge that actually is a major transportation component to our visiting train. And so it's a one-lane bridge. So for us, this is really important that we are able to look at how we can actually maximize that type of transportation to something that's visited. 250,000 people come each year. So we're looking forward to that. And the council recently, in probably, I think it was December or January this past year, actually has been looking at trying to assess and survey and troubleshoot the housing problem that we have here in Clarkdale. We are fortunate that we have great housing, but we also had limited inventory. And so we recognize that. And so they were in the forefront of looking at a study that has actually been put on hold due to the pandemic. And so we're looking forward to what our students can actually give us and provide that can actually work and be married with that type of study instead of just using one study. We're going to have the benefit of utilizing whatever it is that we can get from this ASU program, and then we will be able to share that not only with our own consultant, but we'll be able to share that with several of the other entities, which really is a win-win. I think it's important that the students understand that whatever it is that they provide will assist in the Verde Valley, not just Clarkdale, but it's a holistic approach to this. And so we're looking forward to all these projects. Staff is really good at interacting with the students, as well as you see my council is very engaged. So we're blessed to be here. We're really looking forward to it. We're enthusiastic about what comes out of it. And I thank Ann and Stephen for putting this on and allowing us an opportunity to talk directly with everybody.
Great, thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much. And I want to, real quickly before we start our panel, I want to quickly acknowledge the faculty in the room and the city staff that we have joining us as well. Fun fact, this is a surprise, but we're joined by Ruth Mayday. Ruth is the Community Development Director at Clarkdale, and we were not expecting you to join us. So it's wonderful that you're here to join us today. Ruth Mayday she'll be stepping in at a later point as we get into the semester, taking lead on our affordable housing project and supporting the Sustainability Park project as well. We are joined by Maher Hazing. Maher is the Director of Public Works at Clarkdale, overseeing, as I've heard it put, everything and everything. And he will be leading the historic bridge planning project, as well as serving point on the Sustainability Park project. We're also joined by faculty today. Dr. Nalini Chetri is on the line, and I have to give Nalini some special kudos because actually her class has been working on these projects for years and years and years, and she has an incredible database of fantastic history of working with communities like Clarkdale. And actually, her class served as a pilot for our Project Cities program. So we're really excited to bring her with us to help out with the town of Clarkdale today. We also have Joshua Lohman on the line here with us. He is faculty with the EPICS program, which is Engineering Projects and Community Service. And I think that's the first time I've gotten that acronym right on the spot. But he'll be working with students along with other members of his team, Jared Chef, and others who will be stepping in as mentors as well with the Smart Towns infrastructure project and the Smart Parks project, as well as the Historic Bridge project. So with that, I just wanted to throw that in there real quickly. What we're going to do from here is we'll start asking some of those questions. So what I actually would like to go ahead and pose the first question just to our panelists. We've all talked a little bit about Clarkdale and about the partnership, and I'm wondering if we can maybe start with an opener, if you can just tell us kind of your thoughts on Clarkdale and where you hope that these projects will take us. Why don't we go ahead and start with Mayor Van Gossett?
Well, it's always been really important to me and to the town of Clarkdale to act responsibly and sustainably. One of the things that small towns like Clarkdale are always challenged by is revenue, taking care of their infrastructure, their streets, their water systems, their wastewater systems. All of those things tend to have a lot of deferred maintenance in small communities, meaning they're just kind of putting things off, kicking the can down the road for the future and hoping that some magic will intervene in the meantime. And that's what you guys are, is some of that magic for us. We really appreciate what ASU is doing so far, and we really appreciate the partnership with ASU and Sustainable Cities, because it matches our ethic so well. And not only is it an ethical thing, Clarkdale is a very environmentally responsible and conscientious community, but it'll help us actually form stronger community, which is super important today and very, very difficult to do. Cities these days tend to be about as fragmented as the United States as a whole is. And you have a very small town like Clarkdale that can get fragmented like that. It really doesn't operate very well. And the loss of just the social adhesion and construct is really telling on a small place like Clarkdale. So it's important to us to build community, and having projects like what we're involved in with you is something that strengthens community. That's one of the big goals of the Sustainability Park, and in fact, all of the things that Tracy and you have been working on so far is to build community. So that's my primary goal in all of these things, is at the end of the day, you have a sustainable city that's strong, that enjoys its own company, if you will.
Great, thank you so much. Same question to Councilmember Regner.
Thank you, Stephen. Mayor Van Gossett expressed and explained that quite eloquently. I think as someone who first started coming to Clarkdale from Tempe in 2001 and then finally moved here in 2007, there were some things that stood out for somebody coming new into the community. One was we had these assets that were not being utilized, and the obvious one was the river. And over the course of that time, and under the guidance of Mayor Van Gossett and the former town manager, Gail Mayberry, we have developed that asset quite well. And the access points are now safe, they're developed, they're being utilized, and to our great benefit. Another asset that the town, I think, that is underutilized is our history. And I think that this is something that we're unique about in our state and perhaps the country. And it's something that we love about our town, but I like to say that we haven't totally embraced it. And we haven't embraced it in a way where we are utilizing it as an asset. There are two major events that occurred in Clarkdale's history that has affected its economy. One, of course, was this closing of the smelter, and understanding that Clarkdale was the center of commerce in the Verde Valley while the smelter was operating. We had the only store, we had the only mercantile, we had the only theater and bowling alley and things like that. We were the center of it. And when the smelter closed, of course, that began to shrink. And then the second major event that happened was the 89A bypass, which goes now from Cottonwood to Jerome and cuts through a portion of Clarkdale, but a very small portion. And in fact, actually tends to separate that portion off from the rest of the town. But the remaining businesses in the town at that point began to, again, fold up and close up and move into Cottonwood and other places. And so we have this huge deficit in the town, yet we have this incredible infrastructure of buildings and this master plan community that is not only the commercial buildings and industrial buildings, most of which has been dismantled, but we have the residential portion. We have these planned out residential neighborhoods that were socially stratified according to the rules of the day. And there's a huge, a tremendous story to tell about this integrated residential, commercial, industrial town. And so that's an asset that I think is very underutilized, that we're now beginning to embrace more. And we'll talk about those things, I'm sure, as the questions continue. But I see Clarkdale as, in the report eloquently that you created eloquently points out, we are kind of the hip place of the Verde Valley. People want to move here. And so there's another sense of Clarkdale that we want to capitalize and utilize as we solve these challenges that we have of very low sales tax revenues, because we don't have a lot of businesses in town. And we're relying on property taxes. So we're trying to shift that and have a little more equity in our revenue sources. So these are the challenges, but we know we have assets, but we've got to come together and figure out how we're going to change and maintain that small town feel that people want so much and want to keep. And sometimes the solutions that might help with that are not always going to support just keeping things the way they are. So those are the challenges, but it's also a very exciting time for Clarkdale.
Great, thank you so much. Same open question to Councilmember Hunter. Tell us a little bit about the community and where you hope we're headed.
Okay. The mayor and Mr. Regner are hard acts to follow, but I kind of see Clarkdale as this multifaceted thing that you say, you put all those together and you come up with a perfect diamond, so to speak. So you've got the historic element, which is very, very deep within Clarkdale. I mean, that's the roots of the town and how it started. You've got a river that runs through it, so that's very significant. You've got the train, which is a huge asset, bringing visitors in every year, big numbers. You've got Tuesday Goot, so you've got that treasure that's a national park. You've got the foothills community. You've got like I said, the historic area. You've got the 89A corridor that runs through it that we're hoping will build upon that. You got a lot of traffic that flows through it, so it's prime for commercial development. You've got an industrial park that Mr. Regner said, was dismantled, but, it's got a lot of potential down there. And we've got some small businesses that are starting up down there. We've got the Yavapai Apache Nation that's right there in Clarkdale too. And if you come into the Verde Valley, depending on how you come into it, if you come into it through Mingus, it's the gateway community to Sycamore Canyon, which is beautiful. You've got the gateway into Cottonwood, Sedona, if you want to take it that far. So there's just so many aspects to that, like I said, you get them pulled all together and it creates this just perfect diamond. And, we've been challenged through the past, but I see a bright future ahead for our community, and looking forward to what young minds can help us discover.
Yes, indeed. Well said. Thank you, Councilmember Hunsider. With that, we have a few questions queued up. I would like to prod everyone to give us a few more questions. These are folks who are policymakers at the town level and very, as you heard, very embedded, long histories in the community. So they've got a lot of great input for us. I'm going to turn us over to Jessica Smith, who posed a couple questions about attainable housing. And Jessica, I've just turned on your audio, but you have to unmute your mic.
Okay, can you hear me?
We hear you, go ahead.
My first question is, what are some short-term goals the town has regarding the development of affordable housing in the town? And I say short-term because obviously the long-term goals would be to develop affordable housing. So maybe short-term, something a little bit more specific.
I can talk a little bit about that for you, Jessica, and everybody else that's listening. For me, and I think for the town, the short-term goal is to have housing that people that live in Clarkdale can afford, people that work in Clarkdale, the people that work for the town of Clarkdale, our teachers, our police officers, all of those kinds of people that currently have a very difficult time finding a house that they can afford to live in right here next to their work. So they end up commuting long distances, some from as far away. Well, Maher used to commute all the way from the Rim Country. And we've had other people that live in Phoenix, people that live in Camp Verde, 25 miles away, over in Prescott Valley, and commute over here. So these are, number one, not good for them and their families, but also not a very sustainable solution to getting to work. So I think that's the very clear short-term solution or goal for affordable housing is to provide housing for the people that actually work here in Clarkdale.
If I might next, I think we recognize that housing is a major driver in the economy today, and that there is a need for housing really across the board in all communities, rural and urban. And we are trying to figure out how to respond to some of that movement in the form of like tiny homes and things like that. And I think this has come on us so quickly that we're caught us a little bit off guard, and we're trying to now figure out, okay, where do those fit in there? Because they are one of the solutions to this. The town, I think, though, tends to find itself in the position as a facilitator of those solutions rather than, or that's how we are, that's the kind of partner we are, because we don't have land that we own. When the smelter closed, all that land was sold off. It wasn't that it became the town and the town had it to do whatever it wanted with it. That land was private land, and it was sold off bit by bit. And the town was able to acquire its government complex and things like that, but not very much. And we have acquired some land down in our Bitter Creek wash area that had more to do with the disposal of effluent and things like that. So we don't have that resource of properties that we own that we can offer to a developer to build something on, at least not to in a very large extent. We also have the challenge of we don't have a large retail sales tax base. So most of our revenues are based on primary property taxes. And so we have to figure out how to get additional revenues to come in order to be a more significant partner in the solutions to housing. And so I actually see it as a little bit different order. And I actually think that housing, higher density, mixed use construction and housing in our central business district is the first step, which will create revenues for the town, because there will be then, if it's a pedestrian oriented kind of environment, then people are there walking around. They want the amenities in their lives, like to shop and things like that. And that's where we will generate additional sales tax revenues, at which point we can then take those revenues and apply them to acquiring other pieces of land in areas which we think affordable housing might be more appropriate. In the meantime, we're a facilitator. We are trying to understand the dynamics of what's happening in the economy and the housing as a driver, and how we can participate in that. But that's all we kind of are at the moment, is a facilitator and an inviter to do that. And we can get our zoning codes in order and ordinances and things like that, so that we can be more friendly to that. But that's kind of our role, as I see it, for now, until we solve this other issue. And I think we have the asset there in our historic footprint to do just that.
Can I mention some of the challenges that you have with attainable or affordable housing generally? And I don't know that there have been really good solutions to some of these things, but affordable housing, one of the temptations that towns have is they'll go in and distort the market somehow. In other words, they will interject some kind of an artificial market solution that will regulate the cost of housing or something like that. It's that in itself, usually it becomes an unsustainable kind of a solution. And in fact, for us, the way we try to operate as a town is kind of on an organic level. In other words, things should make sense organically. They should be synergistic with one another. They should be sustainable naturally without having to constantly put new resources or new energy into the system. It should operate on its own. So when you distort the market, you distort that whole system. And it's really difficult for that to retain sustainability in any way. It's something you really need to think about how you're going to do that. Another challenge is maintaining high standards for construction and other kinds of zoning codes, and at the same time have low prices on the houses. The two things don't naturally go hand in hand. And the more restrictive a town generally is with its zoning and whatnot, the higher the price of the house, because it's more difficult and builders can't build as many of them as quickly and everything else as you could otherwise. So somehow you've got to retain the quality of the housing, the safety, the build quality, all of those kinds of things, but still have sustainability. And you can do that by playing with the density and multi-housing, multi-unit housing, and all of those kinds of things. But again, you just really have to pay a lot of attention to how you're getting this cheaper house that. And you always want to watch out for subsidization of housing. Subsidizing housing is a market distortion. It's kind of the definition of it. It also means that you're taking everybody in the town's money and applying it to a particular sector of the town. You've got to be very confident that doing that has a public good that also spreads to the entire town and that somehow improves the town itself. So we tend not to get into subsidized programs of any kind that we can, and we're very careful that we don't subsidize other things that are incorrectly then spread to the wrong people in town or not equitably spread. So again, just something to think about when you're thinking about affordable housing.
Great.
Other concepts where we can be involved is the community land trust idea, where the land is owned by either a private party or the community, the town. And then the houses that are built on it can be purchased by individuals who qualify. And then when they sell those houses, they can benefit from some of the appreciation, but yet that price can be still managed and kept affordable when it's on. So those are the kind of things I think we can look at in the future. Again, we don't have right now the assets. We don't have the land to do that. We might have some. We might be able to use some of the land that we purchased for our wastewater effluent dispersal, because we're going to do something else with that effluent. But we're very limited in that, and those would not be parcels of land on transportation corridors, where there's transit and things like that for people to take, which is an important aspect of that solution. So things that, as we go forward, we can look at, but we've got to get some resources, things in place before that's possible.
I need to make the case first, right? So I want to turn it over to Councilmember Hunsitter to see if you have any comment on this question. And then in the interest of time, I want to move us on to the next set of questions because we've got some more coming in here. But Councilmember Hunsitter, did you have anything to add about the affordable housing challenge?
Yeah, I completely agree with the two previous opinions, but I also want to say that I'm a big fan of adaptive reuse and for infill building rather than bulldozing or turning under all of our beautiful landscape and wide open spaces that we have here in town. So I think that there's huge opportunities there where we don't have to go through and scalp the land to put in a house. So that's kind of my final words.
Great, thank you for adding that. It's a great point. I'd like to come to Rashik Kohli, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name, but we have a couple questions in here, and I think we kind of got a little bit of a 1-2 punch on them if you want to combine those. So I have just turned on your microphone, but you have to unmute yourself. Rashik,
can you hear me?
we hear you. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm part of the Clarkdale internet infrastructure, and I had a couple questions about Clarkdale in general. Like, do you guys have any infrastructure in place already for either like the industrial or residential part of Clarkdale? I know you guys said you're looking for like sustainable resources. So if there's like anything already in place that you guys just want us to like further develop so that it's sustainable over the years. And then another question is like, which communities or groups of people like need this internet service, like schools, businesses, or like residential complexes? Thank you.
Who wants to start on that one?
Well, I'll start real briefly. So the answer to your question, is this for schools or residences or businesses? The answer is yes to all of those. We're really seeing that right now because of COVID and the school situation. Having to have broadband widely distributed in a town that has essentially a Title I school in it means that all these kids are home, and the broadband aspect of it is required for video and other, high broadband using kinds of applications. And in Clarkdale, that's really difficult to do because of the fact that we're rural and we're spread out. So it's difficult to run fiber to everybody's houses. In fact, it's impossible right now under the constraints of our economy. So I think that there's a possibility that 5G might be the answer to that in the future. It might be kind of more decentralized like 5G is than what we're seeing these days. As far as infrastructure is concerned, I think one of the primary things that needs infrastructure improvement is our wastewater distribution. So we're producing a class of wastewater from our wastewater treatment plant that is usable for all kinds of non-potable uses right now. So watering parks, purple pipe going into people's houses for toilets and non-potable uses. We have the water quality that will allow us to do that, but we don't have the infrastructure and the delivery system that can deliver it where it needs to be. And so we end up essentially disposing of this water and hopefully recharging some of it so it adds to the flow of the Verde River. But I think that's our primary first thing that needs to be done, maybe above almost anything else.
Great. Anyone else? Councilmember Hunsader, Councilmember Regner, you just unmuted.
I didn't want to jump in before Councilwoman Hunsader. Did you want to say something first?
No, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think the mayor, in talking about broadband, I think we have identified very clearly that broadband is essential for a number of things going forward. And COVID-19, as the mayor said, has really brought that to the forefront. Although it was always, it's something we have recognized for some time that as a rural community, if we want to grow economically, if we want to be that place where people can come and live and work and play, then broadband is essential. And it's essential for a number of different groups: industry, education, medical, industry. All these things, they need broadband, they need the bandwidth, and we've got to solve that problem. And hopefully technology will solve it before fiber optics solves it. So, but we are very aware of that is a foundation that we have to have in place in order to be the town that we want to be going forward. The other infrastructure challenge that we have is that many of our homes are on wells and septics. We are not able to regulate the use of that water. We're not able to capture the effluent and process it. Even though we have more effluent right now that is processed than we can figure out what to do with, our goal is at some point to capture all of it, because that's that's the second cheapest water you can find. The first cheapest is the water you don't use. The second is the water you reclaim. And I stole that from Mayor Von Gossett. So, but that's what kind of thing that we are facing. We have a lot of homes, and it's probably the majority of the homes in Clarkdale. We are not regulating the water use, and we are not able to recapture the effluent from those homes because we're a rural community, and we can't extend to all these neighborhoods and these homes water, fresh water, potable water, and sewer lines. Where it's in our thoughts and our goals, and we are doing a better job of it all the time. But we have a huge amount of catching up to do with that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Hunsader?
Yeah, and I'll just follow on by saying that we have a huge amount of home workers within town, and our family being one of them, a home-based business. So the internet is painful here within the community. And I think we have more and more people moving in from town or cities and large areas and moving to more rural lifestyle with the hope that they can work from home, and maybe they find it challenging once they get here. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. But yes, broadband is I feel it's a utility that's sadly lacking at this point.
Well, and so far between all of you, we're definitely hearing the theme of urgent, needed now, new challenges. And actually, I'd like to, in the interest of time, I want to ask just one of you to respond to this question, but a follow-up to that from Adiane with one of the smart infrastructure groups, I'm assuming, asked what is the current state of internet infrastructure in Clarkdale? What, if any, are the limitations of implementing an updated internet infrastructure in the community?
Why don't we let Tracy answer that? I think she's more right on top of it than probably the rest.
Sounds good.
So the current state of our internet infrastructure is that there are locations within the center of town, one being our town park that has Wi-Fi. We also have some infrastructure that is currently, because the county had a consortium where they were able to provide to the school directly up on our upper main. We also were able, because we have a county library, which literally, if I point up, is right above my office, which means that some of our offices, well, most of our offices and our clubhouse and auditorium in our complex here actually have some pretty good broadband capabilities. Where we're fragmented is we have several locations within our town, as the mayor pointed out, that we are so widespread that we don't have the infrastructure in any of those areas. And one thing that becomes very apparent when you start talking about this type of infrastructure is Arizona's topography works against us, because it's not as easy to just open up the ground and put that infrastructure in. So you optimize those opportunities when you're doing some of these projects like road construction and putting in water lines and things like that. So we have seen that there is one community that actually, when it was built, in the community's Mountain Gate, right up from the downtown area, it has infrastructure that was put in when they were building the lots out. So it's very fragmented at best. We have a new park that we are going to be working to rejuvenate, as I like to say, which is just down from the downtown area. And we would like for that park to have Wi-Fi, because it's a place that when people go, it's kind of like a passive park that they can actually just leisurely enjoy a path and some of the amenities that are in the master plan for that. So it's pretty sporadic. We have been working with a group called the Verde Valley Regional Economic Organization, that broadband is a part of their long-term, long-range strategic planning. And we actually have a report that's being drafted right now that will talk to some of the infrastructure on one of those major corridors that we were referring to, which is 89A. You also need to keep in mind that APS has a substation, and they are actually updating lots of their fiber within 34 miles, 5 miles north of Clarkdale, but it'll go 34 miles all the way up to Flagstaff.
Great, thank you for that. And by virtue of talking about the topic, I believe we've answered another question in there about some of the desired infrastructure. But maybe I can turn back to Tracy real quickly if there's anything else that you'd like to add regarding the smart infrastructure that you're hoping to incorporate. We do have the breakout coming up, but just if there's any other pertinent details at this stage.
I think I hit everything. I think it's become very obvious that we just need to bridge some gaps. We'd also like some redundancy.
Ooh, nice. Awesome. Well, I'd like to turn to our next project here, the Sustainability Park project. Hada, I'm going to activate your mic here. You posted a nice in-depth question. I'm wondering if you can ask that now to our panel.
Yeah, definitely. So looking into the background of Clarkdale, it really looks like the city is uniquely posed to be a steward in green energy and environmental conservation, and has a strong vision for that in terms of the sustainable park plan. And so I know there's a lot of potential in the area for green energy generation, which can be used for the area, and also sharing out for local businesses and such. And so I guess my question is a little bit on the complementary side of that. What kinds of strategies do you envision for overall reduction of energy consumption levels? So I'm thinking along the thoughts of net zero energy for buildings, movability or walkability, and how this would tie into the fact that I know it was mentioned that in the plan that it was agreed upon for this to be strictly non-residential. So tying that into walkability, movability, and things like that.
Well, I think that any kind of a project, when you look at the balance sheet for a project like this, you look not just at the consumption end of it, but also the production end of it. If you can produce enough electricity at an affordable price, consumption becomes less of an issue. If you can't do that, consumption becomes one of your main issues. Just like your household budget, you know, you can either work with your income or you can work with your outflow. And you want to balance those in a way that makes sense with whatever your system's producing. The sustainability park, one of the primary goals of the sustainability park, and here are the goals that I just kind of wrote down for myself for the park. But there are a lot of them. And the beauty of the sustainability park is that it can accomplish a number of interconnected goals at one time. And one of those is what you're talking about. It's to make sure that the community is walkable. And not only is it walkable, but the paths that they're walking on are low albedo, high permeability kinds of surfaces, those things that help your water situation, that help your heat island kind of aspect. By reducing the need for energy, you can reduce people's costs. And water figures into that whole equation at the same time. What's called the water energy nexus is something that if you're local enough about your water supply and your energy supply, you can reduce the reliance of water on energy. And we'll talk later in the breakout probably about this, but one of the interesting figures is that most households use more water producing the energy that the household uses than they use in potable water. So we want to reduce that. So all of these things, the idea for the whole sustainability park is that it's a single system that's interrelated and synergistic, and it accomplishes all of the goals that you just mentioned at the same time, along with my sheet of others here. Make sense?
Thank you, Mayor Van Gossek.
Great. And I'll put it out there, council members Regner and Hunsitter, if you have anything that you'd like to add to that. And then we have a couple questions from Dr. Chatri.
I think clearly the mayor's the expert on that, and what else I just say what he said.
I agree.
Great. So with that, I think this is going to be probably, oh dear, where are my controls going? Okay, this is probably going to be our last question for this part of the panel before we switch over to breakouts. But Nalini, I am activating your mic now, but you do need to unmute yourself. Can you give us, I think question 2 we'll take into your breakout, but can you give us questions 1 and 3? I think those would be really interesting to the other students.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, Mayor Van Gossek. We go way back, actually. We talked 10 years ago in the Wrigley Hall. So it's nice to catch up after 10 years.
That's right.
And hello, Council Member Hunser and Regner. It's nice to see you. And hi, Tracy. Thank you for taking this question. I know we're going to talk about it in the breakout room. So Tracy and I met this past weekend, and she showed us, she showed me and my husband, who's also a faculty at ASU, just where the potential park was to be. We saw the smelter there, and we saw the areas. So my question basically is, as the smelter has closed down, so what happens to that infrastructure in the surrounding area, because it's adjacent to the potential park? And also basically, an unrelated but related question is, if this park, you said that there is about 240,000 tourists that comes by. So if this park could be a potential attraction, what would be the peak season for those kind of, the tourists, or is it all the way around? So 2 quick related questions, if you will. Thank you so much.
Sure, yeah, Nalini, it's good to, I don't see you, but I see your name there. It's good to talk to you again. I'm glad you're still around helping out. The season really is 12 months out of the year. You have both the train, that 240,000, along with Jerome, that brings a lot of people in, mostly in the warmer months of the season, and the river, which these days is attracting a huge number of people since COVID-19, really unexpected. But amongst those three, you have a fairly year-round kind of attraction for the area. The smelter, I don't know if anybody has talked about the United Verde Soil Program, but what the smelter produced along with a lot of copper was also a lot of effluent from its smokestacks that were filled with lead, arsenic, and other metals that then settled back on the ground around the smelter. So you asked, you know, what's there after the smelter? And one of the things that's there after the smelter is this polluted landscape, which Freeport-McMoRan that owns is the kind of legacy owner of that pollution, is now mitigating and actually remediating in Clarkdale and the surrounding area. Those we see as real opportunities, this remediation that's going on, because we have this very large corporation that's in town doing a lot of work. And at the same time, since they have this equipment in there and they're moving a lot of dirt, we've had them also do a lot of projects for us that fit in with the rest of that remediation. So areas of the town park that are now much nicer than they were before, new parks that we're going into that will actually be built primarily by the remediation project itself, and just other things like that. The smelter right now has a couple of office buildings and some other buildings that were built to accommodate a project that never really came to fruition, which was the reclamation of all of the slag left over from the smelter. The slag itself is maybe an asset. It's an almost inert, very heavy, very almost glass-like and metal-like. It's primarily ferrosilicates. That mean that, yeah, there's a piece Tracy's holding up. And there are some potential uses for that in a sustainability park and in other ways that where you need inert heavy materials like that. So that's about all that's left of the smelter right now. Did that answer your question? Or?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. Yes.
I'd add, we always have heard the term 90,000 cars a year coming in to Clarkdale to ride the train. So if it's 250,000 people, that's wonderful that they're carpooling like they are. So, but one of our frustrations has been that those people come into Clarkdale, go to the train, have a snack before they get on the train, enjoy that beautiful ride, 2 hours up and 2 hours back to some most beautiful country you've ever seen. And then they get in their cars at about 5 o'clock and drive on out of town. And unfortunately, they tend to drive into Cottonwood or Sedona or up to Jerome. And we haven't had a lot of venues to capture them. We now have a hotel that's opened and a brewery, and we still have the restaurants and bars and stuff that we've had before, but COVID-19, of course, is affecting all of that. So keep in mind too that the smelter site is privately owned. And so it's not something that we can just go and do something with and create a tourist attraction around. But heritage tourism is, I think, as I said previously, the underutilized asset that we have got to figure out how to capitalize on. And so here you have the third component of the town, the master plan community. You have the commercial district, you have the residential houses, and you have the industrial area, the smelter area. All very important part of that integrated package that was Clarkdale. And so there are structures there, there are things, venues, if you will, or attractions in there that we could develop if we had a partnership with the owners, or we were able to obtain ownership, or whatever form that would take in order to create this, the story to tell it and how to tell it. And so that when they get off the train, or maybe, they usually have to arrive early, maybe they can stop and check in and they know they're there, then they can kind of walk around and see some of the sites in that area. There's a railroad roundhouse there. There's and other things that could be turned into venues of heritage tourism. and then bring them up into the central business district and talk to them about the different buildings that are there, the history of them, what was in there, why it was, where it fit into the integrated master planning of Clarkdale. And then very close to there is the park, and then there's the houses with different building styles that we can tell the story about what those are. And maybe we even know who lived there. We have all these records of who lived in these houses that left over from the mining days.
Yeah.
So we have a tremendous story that we can tell if we put it together and put some basic infrastructure in, gain the permissions from some of the private property owners to do those things, and then we can capture some of those 250,000 people before they get into their 90,000 cars and right back out of town again. So that's a goal, but that's in our vision. That's it's a vision we're talking about anyway. I can't say that that's the vision we've totally embraced, but it's certainly one that we're talking about as a potential for us.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And we are running up on time here, but I want to turn it over to Councilmember Hunsuter if you have anything to add on the question on tourism.
In the interest of time, I think that they've covered it.
All right. Well, we certainly have covered a lot today. This was a really engaging panel, and I want to just thank everyone so much for your time. Mayor Van Gossig, Councilmember Hunsuter, Councilmember Regner, Tracy, and of course, all of our students who have tuned in here and provided us some really awesome questions. We're going to have to close the room in just a second here. But I just want to say thank you so much for that, everyone. Please consult your event guide for a link to the meeting rooms. I was just notified that they won't open until I close this one down though. So give me a minute before I go open that room for you. And then Councilmember Hunsuter, I saw you unmuted your mic there. Did you have anything that you wanted to say, parting words?
I just wanted to say thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
Well,
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you very much.
Likewise. Well, thank you very much, esteemed council members and Mayor Van Gossig. Thank you so much for taking the time. You're welcome to stick around for the breakouts if you're curious, but otherwise we'll say goodbye to you now. And students, we'll meet you back over in the breakout rooms in just a few minutes. Thanks, everyone.